Midnight arrives without a bell. It announces itself as a low sound, a distant keening, a high wind fraying over stone, scouring the frozen earth where your home is half mine is buried. Outside, the world has vanished into a wall of white. Inside, the dark is absolute. You are asleep when the hearth gives up its ghost. In the hour after the last story, after the final wooden bowl has been licked clean, the fire subsides. Flames shrink to amber coals. Amber coals fade to gray ash. No one rises to feed it. The longhouse breathes a long, soft sigh and settles. In our world, failing furnace. At 3 a.m. is a crisis. Each hour cut in a snowstorm is a small catastrophe. We believe warmth comes from a system, from wires and pipes and humming boxes. When it falters, we feel betrayed, stripped bare. Here, no one startles. You lie on a wooden ledge along the wall. Beneath you, planks, scratchy straw, old rushes, a worn woolen cloth. Above you, the heavy, animal smell of sheepskins, perhaps the shared weight of a burskin with a sibling. Behind a thin partition, cattle shift in the dark, breathing slowly, their bodies radiating a patient, low heat. A brother turns, murmurs in his sleep. Someone pulls a fur higher over his shoulder. The fire is dead, but you are not cold. What keeps you alive is not the flame in the center. It is everything else. The house itself, dug into the earth, clinging to yesterday's warmth. The roof, thick with turf and thatch, refusing to let heat escape. The bed that turns your own flesh into a furnace. The wool and fur that capture pockets of air and hold them hostage. The heavy meal in your belly, still burning slow and steady. The memory of the day's labor, echoing in your muscles as a quiet, inner glow. The simple, undeniable fact that you are not alone. We live in an age of sealed windows and electric blankets, yet we often sit hunched and chilled, waking in dry, restless rooms. The slightest hiccup in our systems feels like a disaster. For them, warmth was not a gadget. It was a web, a tapestry woven from everything they built, everything they wore, everything they did. Their secret wasn't a single trick. It was a constellation of small, smart choices all pulling in one direction. When the flames vanished, the web held. To understand how they survived winters that should have broken them, we must step back into that dark, smoky air. We must look not at the dead fire, but at everything that kept you warm when it died. Close your eyes. Picture surviving the cold. A mind likely conjures a blazing fire. Golden light. People huddled close, hands stretched toward the dancing heat. This image is a lie. In a Viking longhouse, standing right beside the hearth meant choking on smoke. Thick, acrid, and watering smoke that pooled under the rafters. Heat was not a simple gift. It was a negotiation. So, people did not crowd the flames as our fantasies suggest. The hearth cooked food, dried socks, gave light. But it was not a roaring furnace meant to heat the air. It was a tool, used with frugal care. If you could sketch the warmth in that room, it would be a narrow column over the firestone, glowing like a thin candle, a hot zone for toasting hands. A little further out, the warmth thinned. By the time it reached the sleeping platforms along the walls, it was only a suggestion, slight softening of the brutal air. This is hard for us to accept. We are used to heating entire spaces. We seal windows, pump warm air, demand a constant, even temperature. When we enter a cold room, we ask, why isn't the whole room warm? The Vikings asked a different question. Where is the one warm place? And they built their lives around the answer. Wood was not infinite. On the treeless coasts of Iceland and Norway, every log had a price written in sweat and risk. A woodpile was a bank account. Burning huge fires to warm air that would immediately leak away was madness. So, they did not treat flame as the sole answer. They treated it as the first step. The hearth put it into the biffing. Almost everything else was designed to catch that heat, to slow it, to bend it toward the places where it mattered. The modern campfire fantasy is this. You face the heat, turning slowly like meat on a spit. Front warm, back cold. When the flames die, the warmth vanishes. Viking warmth did not work that way. It was not about fighting cold with constant flame. It was about making small amounts of heat do more than they had any right to do. That is why, on a midwinter night, no one leapt up in panic when the last ember faded. The real work was not happening in the bright circle over the hearth. It was happening in the walls, the roof, the platforms, the bedding, the bodies along the sides of the room. We tell stories of northern survivalist tales of more fire, more fuel, more technology. The Vikings built a different story. Theirs was not, how do I make this room hot? But how do we waste as little heat as possible? Then how do we arrange our lives so we don't need the whole room to be hot in the first place? To see the radical difference, start with an uncomfortable truth. Fire, on its own, is terrible at keeping humans warm. Stand back from a campfire on a cold night. Your face glows, your spine chills. Step 2 paces back, and the warmth drops off a cliff. You could build the flames higher, yet most of that extra heat will escape into the sky, long before it reaches your bones. An open flame radiates heat. Yes, but it also dumps the heat into a vast, moving ocean of air. Hot air rises, pulling cold air in to replace it at your level. Inside a building, this is wasteful. The Viking hearth constantly fought this reality. Picture it again. A shallow stone rectangle of coals. Hay smoke minus blackened patch of roof above. Around it, an oval of trampled earth. Beyond that, the wooden benches and platforms along the walls. Stand near the hearth, and you feel the heat. Step to the wall and lie down, and the air is cooler. Your breath might steam. If you judged by air temperature alone, you might think the room had failed. But here was the trick. They were not trying to warm the air. They were trying to warm themselves. Warming air is expensive. Air has mass. It leaks. It races up through cracks. To keep a large volume of air warm, you must feed the fire constantly, like trying to fill a sieve with water. Warming objects is different. A stone beside the hearth, a clay pot, a wooden bench, the very bones of the building. Once these absorb heat, they give it back slowly. Best of all, human bodies, layered in wool, are excellent at holding their own heat, if given the right conditions. The central hearth did 3 things. It cooked, it transformed material, and it raised the temperature just enough that the rest of the system could work. When you lay on your straw and wool, you were not depending on the fire to reach you across the room. You depended on a slight rise in ambient temperature, plus the insulation around your body, plus the heat your own metabolism produced. Fuel scarcity made this non-negotiable. In Iceland, forests vanished in decades after settlement. After that, fuel was a careful calculation. Driftwood, dented birch, heat. This was the energy budget of a household. On the Norwegian coast, hauling firewood in winter meant labor and risk. Icy paths, frozen tools, fingers that stuck to metal. Inland, wood was more available, but snow turned each log into a small victory. Charcoal cost even more effort. Every spark in the longhouse had a trail of sweat behind it. Then there was the smoke. A bigger blaze meant more light, more momentary warmth, but also more coughing. Blackened rafters, risk of stray sparks. Immodest, while managed fire was healthier, safer. It asked a different question. But how do we make this bigger? How do we make this enough? So heat became something you shepherded. When the hearth was lit in the morning, it began warming more than the pot. Stones absorbed warmth. The packed earth floor slowly climbed a few degrees. Timber posts drank in heat. Buddies moved through the space, adding their own. By evening, the longhouse was not a box of cold air with one hot point. It was a collection of objects and surfaces that had been quietly accumulating warmth all day. When the fire sank down, that stored heat did not vanish. It bled out slowly into a space designed to catch and reuse it. The people inside finished what the hearth had started. Once you understand how stubbornly fire tries to throw its heat away, the Viking solution looks less like hardship and more like elegant engineering. Instead of chasing the fleeting comfort of standing near flames, they learned to trap what those flames offered. They turned their own bodies into the primary heaters. That trapping happened on many levels. First, the house itself was a thermal shell, turf stacked thick over wooden frames. Earth piled against outer walls, roofs thatched with layers of straw. Small openings. This did not generate heat. It slowed the loss of every degree gained from sun, fire, bodies, animals. Inside that shell, the layout created microclimates. The coldest zone was near the door. The warmest air clung near the roof when the fire was high. Somewhere in between was a band of tolerable air for daily tasks. And along the walls, just above the floor, a quiet miracle occurred. Here, the house, the bed, and the body worked together. The raised platforms were crucial. My hands span off the ground was the difference between sleeping on a heat-sucking surface and lying on something that could dry and warm. Straw and rushes trapped tiny pockets of air. Woolen cloth added another layer of fibers that held air still. When you lay down and pulled woolen fur over yourself, you were closing a circuit around your own body. Every exhale warmed the little cave under your covers. Your body was always fighting to maintain its internal temperature. The Vikings learned, without the language of physics, that if you give that inner fire the right surroundings, it will do most of the work. This was capturing warmth instead of chasing it. You did not sit for hours by the fire, trying to roast the chill from your bones. You went to your place on the platform, folded yourself into layers, and let your own furnace take over. The real heater was not in the middle of the room. It was under the blankets. And it was not only you. Around you, other bodies did the same work. On the far side of a thin wall, cows and sheep lay in their stalls, promenading, breathing, each one a steady candle of flame. Their combined heat seeped through timber into your space. The herd's survival depended on yours, and yours on theirs. In more ways than food, they reattached to the living space, thickened the invisible layer of warmth hugging the front of the building. Modern heating treats each person as a passive recipient. The Viking system treated every living creature as part of the heating apparatus. Fire was not the heroic source. Flames started the process. They boiled the stew that fueled your metabolism. They dried the clothes. They gave off just enough radiant heat to nudge the interior above freezing. But if you took away the house, the bedding, the clothing, the animals, and the family, you could build the biggest fire in the world and still freeze the moment you stepped back. In other words, the Vikings did not rely on the fire. Fire relied on everything else. That is the first hint of their secret. Comfort is not something you buy from a single source. It is something you build by aligning small edges until they add up. A windbreak here, a layer of wool there, a wall of turf, a sleeping platform a little higher, a cow in the next room. The often people sharing breath instead of facing the night alone. Put a fire in the middle of emptiness, and it burns out, leaving you exposed. Put a modest fire in the middle of a system built to hold heat, and to let the flames die at midnight and still wake warm. When we imagine a Viking winter, our eyes go to the glow of the hearth. The longer you look, the more you realize the glow is a distraction. The real power lies in the shadows, in the shape of the house, in the thickness of the bedding, in the weight of the cloaks, in the slow pulse of animals and people lying together. Fire was only the beginning. The first thing you notice is the low roof. You duck through the doorway. I'm on the lintel. Outside, wind drives snow like thrown sand. Inside, 2 steps in, sensation changes. Not warm, but different. The wind becomes only a sound. Muffled. The air feels heavier, slower. You sense something being held. The longhouse is not a high, echoing hall. It is a low, stretched out space. Its proportions like an upside down ship half buried in earth. The roof pitches steeply. He is that far above the tallest head. Smoke darkens everything above eye level. The world of soot lives up there. The world of heat lies down where you are. To a modern mind, this feels oppressive. Where are the bright windows? Where is the open air? Here, light clings to surfaces. Fire throws orange onto faces and tools. Beyond its reach, in the corners, things are hinted at. The outline of a loom, a shield, sleeping forms under furs. Yet in a northern winter, this shape, low, thick, narrow, if the first defense between your body and the cold, we think of houses as places that make warmth. Flick a switch, and the building delivers heat. When the radiators turn off, we say the house has failed. Viking houses did not make heat. They held it. The difference begins with the ground. Many longhouses were partially sunk into the earth or banked with soil and turf. That earth, dense and slow to change, acted like a massive, invisible blanket. Walk outside, and you see not crisp walls, but mounds, turf slabs stacked like bricks. Snow settles on them. The line between building and land blurs. To the eye, this looks crude. To the body inside, it is genius. The earth doesn't care about the gust hitting the gable. It absorbs heat during the day and releases it back over hours. It dampens violent wings. You can think of that turf as a battery without wires. During every hour the fire is lit, heat leaks into the walls and ground. When the flames shrink, that stored warmth bleeds gently inward. The building does not stay cozy by modern standards, but it cools at a crawl, not a plunge. That is enough to make the difference between shivering awake and sleeping until dawn. Inside, everything is bent toward losing less heat. At the doorway, there is always a bite. Cold pours in like an invisible waterfall, but take a few steps inward, and the climate changes. The central aisle is variable. When the fire is strong, your face prickles while your back feels a chill. When the fire is low, drafts stalk this space. It is the road to the house. Along the walls, something else happens. The raised platforms are the main living surfaces. One step up from the floor, you feel the design at work. Cold air, heavier, slides into the central walkway. Slightly warmer air lingers along the walls. Above the platforms, the packed earth and timber underneath, warmed all day, lend a faint gentleness to the boards. When you lie down, the architecture closes around you like cupped hands. Above, the rafters trap a reservoir of smoke and hot air. Below, the earth forms a vast heat sink. In front of you, the furnace and wall form the last barrier. You can feel the stratification of the air. Lift your hand, and on some nights you feel a colder bend. Stay low, tucked into your nest. The small space around your body stays strangely stable. The longhouse does not make the interior uniform. It makes pockets of survivable climate where you actually are. The ceilings are low for a reason. High ceilings are beautiful, that they create a tall column of space you must fill with warmth. Hot air, given the chance, will rise away from you. Where fuel is limited, that is a luxury you cannot afford. The Viking house refuses this luxury. It presses the roof down, narrows the volume, accepts that heads may bump beams. In exchange, when the fire sleeps, the air stays a few degrees higher for a few hours longer. In deep winter, those hours are an eternity. Windows are another point of difference. Modern houses have many. We like views, sunlight, connection. Glass is a weak point in our thermal armor. Leading heat, we deal with this by throwing more energy into the system. The Viking longhouse often had no true windows, only small openings, shutters, translucent coverings used sparingly. Light came from the door, the roof vent, the fire, torches. To a modern visitor, minus darkness. To someone who lived there, it was a trade minus off, less light for less heat pouring out. Internal doors and partitions followed the same logic. Wooden walls, half minus walls. Thick curtains separated the main space from storage or the by-ray. These were valves, allowing the household to decide when to let air move. On a bitter night, with the fire banked, someone pulls a heavy curtain across the sleeping section. The central aisle, with its drafts, is partially cut off. The smy volume where people lie is shielded. The warmth of bodies, animals, the day's heat and the walls can settle there, thickening the invisible blanket. Everything about the structure says the same thing. Reduce loss. Arrow pathways for air to flee. Weight the walls. Sink the building into something slower than the wind. From a distance, it is easy to underestimate how intentional this was. Cold enforces a ruthless education. If a way of building bleeds too much heat, people get sick, or die, or burn twice as much fuel. Over generations, that mistake is burned out of a culture. You can see that learning in how Viking houses evolved. In tree-rich areas, more timber, in treeless ones, more turf and stone, on coasts lashed by sea winds, profiles lower and more rounded. The details shift, but the principle does not. You do not wage war on winter by trying to overpower it with fire. You make your home a place where winter has fewer ways in. Imagine the heat turned off in a modern house. Walls of light materials, large windows, high ceilings, thin partitions. When the system stops, comfort bleeds away shockingly fast. You feel the temperature drop hour by hour. Floors become cold plates. Windows radiate chill. The house reveals what it really is. Not a furnace, but a shell. Sometimes little better than a glorified tent. How imagine the heat turned off in a Viking longhouse. That happens every night. No more active flame. Yet the house does not betray its inhabitants. The earth around the walls, the turf, the heavy timbers, the compact spaces, the stored goods, the neighboring animals, all give back what they have taken in. They do not stop the cold. They fluid enough that your brain and body can finish the job. You, lying on your platform, experience the architecture as a conspiracy on your behalf. You judge by skin and breath, not by numbers on a wall, but underneath. The building does complex work. The rafters, loaded with smoke, form an insulating layer. Smoke and hot air rise and collect there, slowing further heat loss. The rafters darken over years with soot. Every particle is a memory of fuel burned. The zone you inhabit is below that, benefiting from higher temperatures above and slower cooling at the sides. This arrangement has a cost. Your lungs pay it. Your eyes pay it. Chronic exposure to wood smoke left its mark. Yet from a thermal perspective, the smoky rafters are part of the hidden furnace. The house uses every part of the physics available, even the uncomfortable ones. None of this means Viking houses were magical. On the coldest nights, your breath still fogs, your nose stings. You feel where a blanket has slipped. You wake and know from the feel of the wood that the air has edged closer to freezing. What the architecture gives you is not an end to cold, but a controllable kind of cold. A world where the difference between inside and outside is big enough that your body's own efforts can bridge the gap. There is a moment each morning when you feel that difference most clearly. You swing your legs off the platform, feet eating a scrap of cloth on the boards. The air under your tunic is brisk, waking your skin. You stand, stoop under the rafters. As the aisle toward the door, each step takes you through layers of air. The slightly warmer current near the platforms, the draft in the central lane, the knife at the threshold. When you crack the door open and winter rushes in, you feel the longhouse behind you, suddenly revealed. Not a warm place exactly, but a defended one, a controlled environment in a world that does not care if you live. When you close the door, the building starts the work of recovery. As soon as the opening is sealed, current settle, someone stirs the embers. A few pieces of fuel are added. The glow climbs to flame. The cycle begins again. Heat added, heat captured, heat held. Our modern buildings, for all their sophistication, have largely given up on this partnership with physics. We have walls that can insulate well, We have triple minus glazed windows, but we also crave space, light, fuse. We design rooms for feeling, not for survival. Then we hire machines powered by distant fuels to correct for those choices. When the machines work, it feels like progress. When they fail, the emptiness is revealed. The house grows cold with a speed that surprises us. We have forgotten what kind of animal we are, and what kind of world we live in. The Vikings could never forget. The line between sheltered and exposed was always thin, for architecture carried the knowledge in every joint and seam. No space was wasted. No surface was neutral. Walls were storage, insulation, structure, backdrop all at once. Roofs were protection, filter, oak trap. The half was not a box you lived in. It was a tool you used, tuned by generations of hands that knew exactly what happened when you got it wrong. When you think of their secret, do not picture a single clever trick. Picture the shape of the longhouse itself. Its low ceiling, its thick walls banked with turf, its reluctance to open wide to the world. Picture how that shape catches every small contribution of heat and refuses to let it go quickly. Then picture your own space. High ceilings, large glass panes, walls that meet the ground with no extra mass, a front door that opens directly into a wide hallway where warm air rushes out, a thermostat that tries to make all this invisible. Their houses told the truth. It is hard to be warm where the world wants you dead. For houses often tried to hide the truth behind numbers and systems. The Vikings did not have the option of pretending, so they learned to build in a way that let them sleep when the fire went out. Their architecture was a hidden furnace, not because it burned on its own, but because it knew how to hold on to every flicker of heat on after the lava turned to ash. Lie back in your mind on that raised platform. Feel the rough wood under the straw beneath your shoulder blades, the familiar sag where you have slept for months. Hear the animals shifting behind the partition, the soft thud of a hoot. Smell smoke. Oh! Above you, the rafters disappear into darkness and haze. Straight ahead, the hearth is only a faint red eye in the gloom. If you judge by that ember alone, you might think you are one gust from freezing. If you judge by how your body feels, tucked in, layered, cradled by a building that has learned to stand between you and the sky, you understand the quiet truth. The fire can sleep because the house is still awake. The first sensation is not the fur against your cheek. It is the difference in the air. Above you, toward the sooty rafters, the air is sharp and thin. If you lift a hand from the blankets, your skin pricks with cold. A breath drawn to high tastes of old smoke in winter. Put down where you lie. Pressed into the layered bedding, the air changes. It thickens. It softens. You can feel your own warmth building in it, slow as a rising tide. You are not lying on a bed in the modern sense. You are part of the room's architecture. The sleeping platform is built into the longhouse wall, a continuous wooden ledge. By day, it is a bench for mending and carving. By night, it is transformed. Straw is spread, falling cloth is rolled out. Furs are shaken and laid. What was furniture becomes a nest. The height matters. If you swallowed your feet down now, you would feel it instantly. The floor, packed earth and ash, drinks heat. Stand there barefoot, and cold climbs into your bones. The platform lifts you away from that. Half a meter, perhaps a little more. In thermal terms, it is a border. The wood underneath has dried out, warmed a little. It sits above the coldest cool of air, which always settles at the lowest point. Cold air is heavy. It slides into the lowest spots. By raising the place where you sleep, you step just above that invisible puddle. Look at the planks beneath you, and not perfectly level. Time has bent them. Many platforms were built with a subtle intention, a slight tilt so your head rests higher than your feet. The incline helps with comfort, with breathing. It also nudges air to circulate in small loops under your body, preventing dampness from lingering. On top of those boards lies the real foundation straw. It prickles. Tiny broken pieces find their way into your hair and clothes. And as you shift, you feel what it does. It springs. It gives. Every stalk is a rigid line that holds the fibers around it apart. Thousands of these stalks create a tangle of tunnels. What fills those tunnels is air. We forget that air is the only thing that truly keeps us warm. Fire heats air or surfaces, which then heat us. Says down. Straw, they are not one in themselves. They are shapes for air to hide inside. The less that air moves, the more it belongs to you. When you lie down, your body presses into the straw. Some stalks bend and break. Others resist, forming a mesh that cradles you. The spaces inside that mesh trap the air your body has already warmed. Instead of flowing away to join the colder ocean of the room, it lingers in your shape. If you lay on bare wood or stone, your warmth would travel in a straight, efficient line away from you. Nature equalizes temperature wherever it can. On straw, the path is crooked. Every piece of fiber interrupts it, slowing the transfer. Heat has to jump from stalk to stalk through tiny pockets of still air that resist the jump. Some warmth makes it out. Much of it does not. Or it gets caught in the loops and stays near you. This is why when you first crawl into bed, the bedding feels neutral or cool. And half an hour later, it feels as if a secret fire burns beneath you. No one has lit a fire. You are the fire. Over the straw lies another layer wool. The cloth beneath you might be coarse wood now, woven from sheets woolen beaten until dense. It is not soft in a modern way, but it is tough. It keeps the straw from attacking your skin while preserving the breathability of the layer beneath. The wool itself adds another maze. Fibers twisted around fibers, making tiny rooms that warm air is reluctant to leave. The blanket you pull over yourself works the same way, only more so. Hold a piece of woven wool to the light, and you see a constellation of gaps between threads. To the eye, they are nothing. To air, they are narrow doors. When you lie still, your exhaled breath your skin. Your blood donate heat to the pocket of air pressed between your body and the cloth. Some of that heat tries to rise. In a white-open room, it would roll off you like mist, mixing with colder currents and vanishing. Enter hits a forest. Each fiber grabs a little energy, warms slightly, and warms the air next to it. The outer side of the blanket stays closer to room temperature. The inner side belongs to you. The result is a gradient, a smooth staircase of heat from your skin to the world. The steps are small enough that the flow is gentle, not of rush. That is the only difference between shivering and sighing with comfort, the speed at which your body loses its warmth. Then there is fur. If your household is done well, you feel the weight of pelts. They lie like snowdrifts, dense and heavy. Their hairs are layered in such numbers that the air almost gives up. Fur is what an animal grows when it cannot afford to lose heat. It is a masterclass in survival. Thawed hairs to shed water, and a furrow to hold warmth, the skin beneath to anchor the system. Now that system is yours. Sweep your hand over the outer surface of a pelt, and it feels cool and slightly oily. Slide your fingers underneath, between fur and wool, and the air there hugs your skin. The hair traps it so tightly that convection, the process by which warm air rises and cold falls, is almost choked off. There is no room for large currents to form. Temperature changes happen by conduction, tiny collisions of molecules, not by great shuffling movements. Conduction is slower. Slowness here is mercy. You pull the furs up to your neck. Your breath moistens the air under them. The woolen straw below you catch warmth that leaks downward. The wall at your back remembers the long day of fire and bodies and it's back what it can. Within minutes, you feel a change. The house has not become warmer. The embers in the hearth are fading. The air in the aisle is cooling. Breath there strips heat from teeth and tongue. Inside your little tent of fibers and air, the opposite is happening. Your skin pulls away from the initial chill of the blankets and relaxes into a slowly rising temperature. Muscles unclench. Fingers and toes, which ached when you first lay down, grow dull and heavy. You shift once, finding the channel your body has carved in the straw and settle. It is a strange reversal. In most of life, heat moves from outside in. The sun warms your face. The fire warms your hands. Here, you are the source. The world beyond the bedding is cold and will always be cold in winter. But you, wrapped in straw and wool and fur, have stopped fighting the whole world's temperature. You are only fighting the few centimeters of space around your body. Is the core of the Viking bed's brilliant. Modern thinking clings to the idea of filling a room with hot air. We talk about room temperature as if the entire volume must be coaxed into friendliness. The Viking bed takes a more precise approach. It defines comfort not as a property of the room, but as a property of the necklace around your skin. Heating an entire longhouse to shirt-sleeve warmth would have required enormous, constant fuels, keeping the palm-size zone of air hugging your chest, your feet, and knows that is work your own body can do if you give it the right allies. Straw is one ally, wool is another, fur is a third. The final ally is air itself when it is trapped and tamed. Think of air as a nervous animal, left free. It is always moving, especially when there is a temperature difference. Warm air wants to rise. Cold air wants to rush in. Gamma switching is what makes you feel draft. The constant licking of cooler currents against skin that had just grown warm. The Viking bed, layer by layer, pins that animal down. Between the straw, the air pockets are so small that warm air rising means only a single tiny pocket shifts its energy to the fibers around it. There is nowhere big enough for a full-fledged draft to form. Between the woven threads of wool, the same thing happens. Warmth is distributed by touching, not by flowing. In physics terms, you have reduced convection and forced most heat transfer to happen by conduction, the slower process. Slow is the key. Your body keeps adding warmth all night, but it has a limited budget. If drafts are allowed, that budget is blown quickly. You feel as the sinking disappointment of a bed that turns cold when you shift. In well-constructed Viking bedding, the budget is spent slowly, in a controlled way. The pocket of air around you stays comfortable for hours. Just a moment deep in the night when the system shows its full power, the longhouse is almost completely dark. The last log has collapsed into ash. Only the faintest red line shows where an ember still lies. The sounds have shifted. Earlier, there was talk, the clatter of balls, footsteps. Now there is only breathing, human, animal, together like waves. You are awake enough to notice. Perhaps the wind hit the wall and made a board creak. Perhaps a child turned over and bumped your knee. You blink, eyes open in the cold dark, and do the simple, ancient test. You move an inch. The air outside your covers kisses your cheek and the tip of your nose. It is cold enough to make the tiny exposed patch of skin ache, but the air against the rest of you has become something else entirely. From neck to ankle, under wool and fur, the temperature feels almost indecently high. Your own body has spent hours quietly heating that sealed space. If you slide your hand down to your feet, you feel it even more. They are not icy stumps. They are warm. The joints softened. The arches relaxed. A heat has pooled there, caught by the narrow foot of the bedding. When you flex your toes, it feels as if you are pushing against water instead of empty air. You are, in essence, inside a small, long-honest temperature oven that your own metabolism fuels. It is not perfect. If you fling the covers off, the pocket is punctured. If your bedding is thin or wet, the system fails. But when everything works, straw air thickly, wool dry, furs intact, platform dry, while solid, the warmth can feel almost magical. The Vikings did not have thermometers. Their knowledge was tactile, built from countless nights of trial and error. They knew fresh straw worked better than old matted straw. They knew a damp wool blanket was a misery, yet still better than a damp linen sheet. They knew the difference between a cheap coat that let wind through and a good one that turned wind aside. Over time, this tactile knowledge congealed into habit. Straw was changed out regularly. Bedding was dried by the fire on rare sunny days. Furs were beaten, shaken, mended. No one spoke of optimizing thermal efficiency. They spoke of comfort, a sickness avoided, of children who slept through the night. If you look at modern bedding through this lens, some of it looks oddly fragile. Foam mattresses that trap heat and moisture, creating swamps. Synthetic duvets that let air slide too easily or trap sweat. Beds positioned in the middle of big, open rooms where any warmth you generate is stolen by cubic meters of indifferent air. We have chosen aesthetics and ease over the simple question Viking bedding answered every night. How do we help a human body keep its own heat? There is another difference, quieter and less obvious. You are rarely alone on a Viking sleeping platform. The private bed is a recent invention. In the longhouse, space is too valuable. You lie shoulder minus to minus shoulder, hip minus to minus hip, sometimes 3 or 4 across. Children tuck themselves into any gaps. When the household is full, you may feel pressed from both sides. At first, that feels like a loss of autonomy, but in terms of warmth, it is a multiplication. Each body is its own furnace. The child on can heat a small pocket under blanket. Put them together so close that legs and backs and arms share contact, and you tie their systems into a network. If one person runs hotter, their warmth bleeds into the group. If an elder runs colder, the risk is cushioned by being physically linked to others. You felt this phenomenon sharing a small tent on a cold night, piling under a blanket with someone on a couch. The difference between alone and together is stark. Together, even if the room is cold, the space under the shared cover quickly becomes almost too warm. Alone is struggled to build that same heat. The Viking bed system makes this ordinary human fact structural. It expects and uses it. Furs are sized to cover multiple people. Platforms have no built minus and dividers. There might be personal spots, but they are part of a larger continuous mattress. Warmth can migrate easily, not just through the air but through contact. From a strictly physical standpoint, it is hard to overstate how effective this is. Heat moves faster through solids than through gases. When your leg rests against someone else's, warmth does not have to cross a layer of air. It moves directly through tissue. The result is faster equalization within the group. Peaks and valleys of temperature smooth out. No one gets to hoard warmth entirely. No one is entirely deprived. To a modern individualist, this may sound like compromise. To a Viking trying to keep a family alive, it was insurance. The bed, then, is not just a personal hearth. It is a shared one. A slab of wood, a heap of straw, layers of wool and fur, and the bodies of the people you depend on, all combining to create his own where the outside world's violence is muted. Fall back in your mind and look at the longhouse from above. In the darkest point of the year, the fire pit is a dull red wound, as healed. The air above it cools fast. Toward the roof, the smoke layer is a greasy band. The door is a faint pale rectangle edged with frost. But along the long walls, on the sleeping platforms, lie shapes wrapped in layers. Each one is a soft heat source. Each one is surrounded by a halo of slightly warmer air under wool and fur. From a thermal perspective, the building is no longer a single room. It is a series of tiny, overlapping climates, each anchored by a human being and their bedding. The turf walls and earth beneath keep those climates from collapsing. The bed itself keeps them from dissipating. The person in the gut keeps them alive. We often imagine Viking survival as a matter of toughness, of gritted teeth and stoic suffering. There was plenty of suffering, but the more you look at the Viking bed, the less it seems like blunt toughness, and the more it looks like finesse. It uses cheap materials: straw from harvest, wool from sheep, furs from hunted animals. It uses basic physics: air resists heat flow. When still fibers can hold air, still bodies generate heat constantly. It combines those facts into a design that allows a child, an elder, a laborer to lie down in a structure half minus buried in frozen earth and within minutes feel a warmth that would surprise someone who had only seen the cold outside. The embers in the fire pit are optional to this experience. They make it better. If they die, the bed carries on. In that sense, the Viking bed is the purest expression of the secret. It does not deny how dangerous the cold is. It does not waste effort trying to heat the unfriendly emptiness of the whole world. It accepts the limits and quietly builds a little world of its own around each sleeper. One straw, one thread, one hair at a time. You, lying there with your nose cold and your toes warm, become the center of a small, fiercely defended climate. The longhouse sheltering that climate is another layer of defense. Beyond that, there is the landscape, indifferent and lethal. Between your skin and that indifferent stands straw, wool, fur, and air, all arranged by human hands that understood, on a level deeper than words, that the most reliable hearth in winter is the one you carry inside your own body. You do not sleep alone. That is the first thing to understand. Warmth was never a purely individual achievement. It was something made between bodies, layered and shared. In our world, the image of a proper night's rest is often a single person in a private box. One bed, one room, one door that closes. In the Viking world, such isolation would have looked less like a luxury and more like a threat. From the moment you step into the longhouse at night, you can feel why. It is late, deep in winter. Outside, the sky is a black vault of uninterested stars. The yard creaks with frost. The breath of cattle goes up in white plumes, that briefly when the door opens, then the door shuts, and the outside world falls away. Inside, the first impression is not of heat, but of density. Sound is thicker. The space is full. Tools hang from beams. Bundles of wool are stacked in niches. Barrels line the walls. And above all, there are people. They are not scattered through separate chambers. They exist in layers. Someone stirs a pot. Someone mends near the fire. Children chase each other until a parent snaps a few words. An elder leans back on the sleeping platform, wrapped in a cloak, watching. Every breath adds something to the air. Every body radiates a smile. Invisible halo of heat. You notice it most clearly if you remember the yard you just crossed. Out there, the cold was an active force, gnawing at your face and fingers. In here, it is merely a presence at the edges. The look near the door presses faintly at drafty gaps, but it does not dominate. A difference is not a roaring fire. That could never be large enough on its own. The difference is that you are not alone with the cold anymore. There are others between you and it. The day winds down. The cot is emptied. Tools are put away. Bank the fire. Settle the animals. Bar the door. One by one, people climb onto the raised platforms along the walls. This migration might be the single most important warmth ritual, though no one calls it that. There is no ceremony, just habit. Someone yawns, pulls off outer layers, and crawls under the furs. Someone else follows. The bench becomes a living organism, sprouting mounds and shapes as blankets rise and fall with breathing. If you are young, it might be last up. There is always one more log to carry. When you finally climb onto the platform, you ease into the narrow strip left for you between an older brother and a cousin. There is no question of finding your own corner far away. There simply isn't room. At first, it feels crowded. A knee bumps yours. An arm brushes your shoulder as someone turns. The weight of shared furs makes it hard to shift. The smell is intimate wool, sweat, smoke, the faint animal tang of leather and skin. But as you ice still, another sensation rises. Warmth, low and steady, cutting from both sides. You can feel it where your upper arm presses against a rib cage. You can feel it along the line of your back, which is not exposed to a wide gulf of cold air, but to the curve of another human body under layers. The bedding that covers you is not yours alone. It stretches over several bodies, its edges tucked in where someone has learned the best way to keep drafts out. The shared cover traps not just your heat, but theirs. One person trying to warm a large blanket is like a candle in a barn. It can be done, but it can fall undying. An any gush of cold air will snuff out the game. 5 bodies under the same blanket on more like a bed of coals. Warmth spreads through fabric and flesh. Equalizer. This is not metaphor. It is physics. Every human body at rest gives off a consistent amount of heat. Alone in a large cold room, that heat leaks away as fast as it is made. Your body warms the air directly above it. Vast air rises and is replaced by colder air in an endless quiet churn. Faring a bed in a narrow space with others slows that churn. The warmth from each person has a shorter path to travel before it meets the warmth from others. There is less outside for the cold to pull from. The Viking longhouse takes that principle and scales it up. Imagine the building at night as a kind of lung. The animals in the byre are one lobe. The people on the sleeping platforms are another. Each breath they exhale is warm and damp. Each body gives off heat. In a big empty room, those little contributions would drift apart and vanish. Here, in a low, crowded space with thick walls, they add up. Now add the animals properly. On the other side of a wooden partition, cows lie in their stalls. Sheep curl together, noses tucked toward their flanks. Goats shift and mutter. Their sheer mass is impressive. A single cow weighs several times what you do. Inside that mass, metabolism hums. A cow's core temperature is higher than a human's. It burns food to keep endurance at that heat, and the byproduct is a constant trick of warmth into the air. Your ancestors noticed this long before anyone expressed it as a number. They knew that the cattle made the byre the warmest place in the house in deep winter. They knew that a goat pen, when closed, stayed kinder than an empty shed. They learned through generations that putting animals in a separate detached building was a luxury for milder climates. In harsher places, you bring the animals into your thermal circle. Though the longhouse is not a house with a stable attached. It is a single system with zones. The animals have their space. The people have theirs. The wall between is not so much a barrier as a membrane, letting smells, sounds, and crucially heat seep through. You might curse the smell at times. You do not curse the warmth. Livestock are not only wealth on the hoof, they are radiators that eat hay. On nights when the wind shakes and the fire is low, that shared warmth is more than comfort. It is the difference between the air hovering a few degrees above freezing or well below it. Your bed system can handle a certain gradient between you and the room. If the room plunges far past that, all your clever layers struggle. The animals move that baseline point upward, ending the whole interior to a slightly kinder level. You feel this most clearly when you lie where the human and animal's owns overlap. Tonight, you have been pushed to the outer edge of the sleeping platform. The new child has joined the family. An injured uncle has come home to heal. You end up near the partition where the wall is thinnest. At first, you might be resentful. It is drafty air here. Cracks in the boards near your head let in whispers of night. But as you settle, you discover the compensation. The hunter back through the wood comes the steady rhythm of a cow's breathing. Each exhale releases warm, moist air into the stall. Some of that air finds its way through gaps into your corner. It is not dramatic. You do not feel a hot wind. But, compared to the sharp cold near the door, this edge of the house is surprisingly gentle, combined with the warmth of the bodies pressed in front of you. Under the communal furs, you exist in a kind of sandwich. Animal heat behind, human heat ahead, wooden woolen straw in between. The middle of your chest feels as if someone has placed a small, steady hand over it. Your nose is still cold. Your fingers still prick if they stay outside the blankets too long. At the core of you, the part that matters most for survival, floats in an environment your modern self might hesitate to call harsh at all. This is not romance. It is plain fact. In the battle against cold mass matters, one person in a large unheated space is fragile. Their heat is almost nothing to work with. 20 people for cows, a dozen sheep, and 3 goats in a sealed, low-minus roofed space are an entirely different proposition. Their combined heat output changes the environment. They are not just surviving in it, they are reshaping it. Modern science has numbers for this. The Vikings did not need numbers. They had experience. They would have noticed that a winter house full of people and animals felt different from an empty one. That when half the family left on a journey, the air inside felt thinner, harder. That when the household was packed visitors in minus laws, guests seeking shelter from a storm, the cold outside seemed further away. In harsh years that crowding might have been unpleasant. Food stretched thinner, tempers flared. Privacy was almost non-minus existent. Yet from the perspective of warmth, more bodies meant a stronger shield against the season. When you have lived your whole life like this, the connection between closeness and survival writes itself into your instinct. You understand that distance is dangerous. The old traveler trying to sleep away from shelter is courting trouble. Even in summer, when sleeping outside under the stars is a pleasure, the memory of winter remains. Together is safer. That sense is not only physical, it is emotional, and the two are entangled. Lying on that crowded platform, you are not just warm because of the bodies against you. You are warm because you are not lying there alone, wondering who will hear if something goes wrong. If an ember jumps from the hearth, someone will see it. If enemies come, someone will hear the door. If a child cries out, a hand will reach across the darkness. The house does not sleep as a single oblivious organism. It dozes in shifts. Someone is always half-minus awake with a nagging back or an anxious mind. Someone is always closer to the door. Someone closer to the animals. Someone nearer the fire. That diffuse vigilance is part of what allows others to sink into deeper, more generous sleep. Modern research has shown what Viking bodies knew. Feeling safe is a prerequisite for true rest. When your brain is convinced you might be attacked or abandoned, it keeps your sleep shallow, your muscles tense, your heart ready to race. When that sense of threat is reduced, your body trusts the night enough to let go. Here, safety is not promised by locks and alarms and private walls. It is promised by proximity. By the weight of another person's leg against yours. By the sound of another person's breathing in your ear. By the knowledge that if you stop breathing in the night, someone will feel it. Warmth, in this context, becomes inseparable from belonging. To be excluded, to be banished from the communal sleeping space, is not just socially painful. It is physically dangerous. Rockcasts and saga stories often face not just the violence of enemies, but the violence of exposure. The nightly pooling of shared heat is something they no longer have access to. Their punishment is not only to be unloved, but to be cold. We live now in a world that has reversed the symbolism. Sharing a room with many people is often coded as poverty. Having your own room, your own climate control, your own bedding, your own locked space is coded as success. The colder it is outside, the more we expect our individual box will protect us. Most of the time, as long as the grid holds, it does. But that protection is brittle. Picture a modern apartment on a winter night. Walls are reasonably insulated. Windows are double-minus glazed. Radiators tick. The air is a uniform 22 degrees. You walk barefoot and feel no sting. You go to bed alone under a light duvet. Then imagine the heat fails. A storm knocks out power. A boiler breaks. Within an hour, the radiators cool. The evenness of temperature dissolves. Held presses against the glass and bleeds in. The vast volume of air in all your separate rooms slides downward, degree by degree. If you stay alone in your bed, you quickly learn how little insulation a single thin blanket offers. You might pile on clothes, more blankets, a coat. Unless you have been unusually deliberate, your safety now depends on a technology you do not control and cannot repair at 3 in the morning. In that scenario, one of the most effective things you could do is exactly what a Viking would have done without thinking. Move closer to others. For neighbors in one room, all their blankets and coats piled together on one bed can ride out a cold night much more safely than for people shivering in separate units. The combined heat of their bodies, the reduction of their volume, the shared vigilance all recreate in an ad-hoc way what a longhouse does by design. We have not lost the physics. We have only forgotten the depth lies around it. When you look back at the Viking longhouse, something else becomes clear. Immunity for them was never just an abstract good. It was a piece of survival technology. Your king group, your household, your alliances were your backup heating system. Your access to a sleeping platform was more than a matter of status. It was a guarantee that when storms came, it would not be trying to keep your core temperature up with only your own metabolism between you and the dark. Even the way disputes are handled in saga stories reflects this. People can hate each other, feud, plot, nurse grudges, fight. When winter clamps down, households consolidate, care taken in, sometimes uneasily. Hospitality rules tighten. Under the same roof, lying not far from each other at night, are people who might try to kill each other in spring. For now, they share warmth. You, on that outer edge of the platform, might be lying next to someone you distrust. Your shoulders touch under the same furs. Your body cannot help but accept the heat. In the language of the body, warmth is still warmth, whatever the politics. Your survival tonight depends on that uncomfortable closeness. If the emotional paradox of shared heat could be worn, you must accept vulnerability. You forsake some privacy. You surrender the illusion that you can get through the season on your own. You place your body, and with it your life, in a space partially controlled by others. In return, you receive not just comfort, but a slower rate of loss in a world that is always trying to take things from you. The Vikings leaned into this paradox because they had no choice. Their climate and technology made the cost of isolation too high. In doing so, they accidentally created living arrangements that modern science now recognizes as beneficial not just for warmth, but for mental health. Shared sleeping, shared meals, shared labor, these are patterns that reduce loneliness. Loneliness is now known to worsen cardiovascular health, disrupt sleep, and increase perceived cold. To feel alone in a hostile environment is to feel colder, even if the actual temperature is the same. To feel held, even in a physically chilly space, is to feel warmer. So when you imagine the Viking secret, do not think only of clever walls and bedding. Think of the sheer stubborn insistence on not leaving each other alone with the cold. Think of the way the longhouse gathers people at night into a single breathing organism. Think of the animals folded into that organism, their warmth woven into the fabric. Think of the way a child sleeping between parents is safer. Then extend that image outward until it includes a whole farm, a whole village. The warmth in numbers is not just a saying here. It is a physics lesson written in the flesh. You, lying on the outer edge with cold pressing at your nose and warmth pressing at your spine, exist at the boundary of that lesson. Behind you, the soft tremble of a cow's breath. And in front of you, the slow and self-minus conscious heat of kin. Jesus, of you, the restless world that would gladly pull the life from your body. That thing stands a simple profoundary and to not face the cold alone if you can help it. Share air, share blankets, share fear, share sleep. It is not that fire does not matter. When the flames are high, everyone feels the difference. But when the fire sinks, when the embers heighten the long night stretches, the true quiet furnace is not in the middle of the room. It is in the fact that in this house, in this culture, one person's warmth is never allowed to stand alone against the dark. The first thing that touches the cold is not your skin. It is the wool. You step out of the longhouse just before dawn, pushing through the heavy door. The world outside hits you like a fist. The air is knife-minus sharp, full of small, hard snow drifting sideways. Your breath rises in white plumes that freeze in your mustache. But your core, your chest, your belly, the deep place where your heart beats, is not naked to it. There is a wall between you and the air, and that wall walks wherever you do. It is easy, looking back, to think of Viking clothing as costumes, the stuff of dramas and museums. For the people who wore them, these garments were pieces of portable architecture. The same logic that built turf walls and low roofs also build what you are wearing now. Every layer is a surface. Every fold is a windbreak. Every pocket of air between fibers is a room you carry around your body. Under your cloak, Closest to your skin is your under tunic. Linen if you are lucky, coarse wool if you are not. It is not thick. Its job is not to keep you warm. It is to keep you dry. It drinks sweat away from your skin and passes it outward. Over that rests a heavier woolen tunic, perhaps another. It drops to mid-thigh. Around your legs run wool trousers or hose, wrapped and bound with strips of cloth at the calves. Your feet are swaddled in foot wraps, then leather shoes. Over all of this hangs your cloak, a great piece of dense wool, pinned at one shoulder so it drapes around you like a 1-person ant. From the outside, you look composed. Inside those layers, a quiet battle is fought with the air. Every layer you it does to things it slows wind, and it traps air. Rain is the great thief. Standing in still cold air, you can tolerate lower temperatures because the warmth your body gives off can pull around you. That wind and that thin layer is stripped off again and again. It is like someone repeatedly dipping you in cold water. No fabric is truly warm if the wind slices through it. So Viking clothing is built to break the wind's path into a maze. The tunic, trousers, and cloak all overlap at different angles. The hem of your tunic covers the top of your trousers. The cloak falls over both. Leg wraps crisscross around calves and shins, breaking up long straight channels where wind loves to travel. Nothing is perfectly sealed, but every layer forces air to take a more tortuous route to reach your skin. At the same time, those layers trap the very thing the cold is trying to steal, your own warm breath seeping out through your skin. Between the tunic and cloak, between the cloak and the world, between wool trousers and leg wraps, there are countless tiny chambers. Most are not visible. They exist in the thickness of the fabric itself. Wool, especially the kind used then, is not a smooth sheet. Each fiber is crimped, curled like a microscopic spring, then spun into yarn unwoven. That crimp holds the threads apart just enough to create a forest of little hollows. Air slips into those hollows and stays. It is the same principle that makes the Viking bed work. Still, air is good air. Air that does not move cannot quickly carry heat away. Under your cloak, in your sleeves, along your torso, the air touching your tunic warms by a degree, then another. As your body donates energy to it, the wool traps sit and forces any new colder air to fight through 1,000 twists and turns. This is why, if you have ever worn good wool on a cold day, there is a moment when the garment stops feeling foreign and starts feeling like an extension of you. At first, when you leave the house, everything is cold. The wool feels rough, inert. Then, after a few minutes of walking, your own tenements it. You begin to sense a buffer, held at the fingers, at the tip of your nose, but warmth gathering under your chest, along your sides, at your lower back. For a Viking, that feeling was not a bonus. It was the point. Talk today about how modern fabrics wick moisture or breathe. In the Viking world, wool was the miracle material that did all that without explanation. Cheap did the work. That will evolve to do exactly what you are asking it to do now. The crimp in each fiber creates precious air pockets. The structure absorbs some moisture without losing its spring. Even damp wool keeps insulating. It can take on water slowly while its outer surfaces still hold dry air. It also carries natural lanolin, an oil that helps shed water and adds wind resistance. When the Vikings sheared their sheep, spun the fibers, wove them into cloth, they were harvesting an animal's lifetime of adaptation and turning it into human shelter. They did not need a textile engineer to tell them wool was special. They had hands. They knew how a linen shirt clung old and clammy if you sweated and then stood in the wind. They knew how wool, even when damp, still felt strangely warm. Its fibers held their own heat near your body instead of handing it to the air. They knew a child in woolen layers fared better in sleep, so they built their wardrobes around it. When you pull your coat tighter against the sea wind, feel its weight tag on your shoulder where the brooch pins it, you are feeling centuries of observation and woven fine. The cloak is not an accessory. It is a wall, the immovable, personal, adaptable wall that can be a blanket at night, a sail against strain, a windbreak on a long ride, a makeshift tent. Now take that wall aboard a ship. The horizon is a dirty gray line. The fjord opened into the ocean days ago. The long ship rises and falls, planks creaking, us biting in rhythm. Use it on your rowing bench. Knees braced, boots wet. Salt spray flicks up and freezes and crusts on the rails. There is no fire. You are surrounded by wood, tar cloth, pitch, things that burn too well to tolerate sparks. If you went out here in nothing but a thin tunic, you would be courting death. The cold is not a dramatic blast. It is an endless creeping demand made worse by wet. Every splash against your legs, every bit of spray, carries away more of your heat as it evaporates. Yet under your cloak, your core is holding. The cloak is drawn forward over your knees, tucked tight, turned into a hemisphere of wool around your upper body. Your arms move inside it as much as possible. Your breath fills that small space with humidity and warmth. Your underminus layers wick away sweat from rowing and send it outward. Your thighs ache. Your fingers, when exposed to grip the oar, sting and go numb. Your face is raw. But inside that bubble of layered cloth and trapped air, the temperature is several degrees kinda. Your heart beats in that shelter. No one on this ship thinks of a cloak as outerwear. It is more like a small, wearable room. At night, if you beach somewhere, it becomes a house within a house. You eye down bracken, rat a cloak around you, paw its hood over your head. Sleep comes in something very much like the environment of the longhouse bed, only smaller and more exposed. The same physics apply. Full plus air plus flesh equals a stubborn pocket of warmth. Viking clothing focuses on the core because the core must not fail. If fingers can hurt, you can lose them and live. That toes can freeze and still leave you a heartbeat. That if the temperature of your liver, your heart, your brain drifts too far down, the game is over. So, everything from the cut of your garments to the way you fasten them is oriented toward keeping your torso's heat loss low. That is why the neckline is high and the opening small. Why you might trap a scarf around your throat. Why your belt sits snug, closing off gaps where wind could slide up and strip your belly of warmth. The chest, the lower back, the belly, these are walled and drain minus walled with fabric. Extremities get their own micro minus shelters. On your head, a cap or hood. It fits close to your skull, extends downward, covering ears and neck. In colder regions, it might have fur along the edge. Fur does something subtle. As your warm breath rises, it hits that ring of hair. The fur disrupts the airflow, slowing the speed at which your breath escapes. Some of it is deflected back toward your face. Vikings did not have the language of fluid dynamics, but they had eyes and cheeks and enough winters to figure out that certain arrangements of fur made the wind less cruel. On your hands, mittens beat gloves. Separate fingers present more surface area to the cold. Ime and Matsu fingers huddle. They share warmth like bodies on the sleeping platform. A windproof outer layer leather over a wool mitten creates a dual system. Wool traps heat. Leather stops wind and sheds water. Leg wraps serve the same double purpose. Vampires to travel up the line hallowed tunnel and betrath their leg. Grab that leg snugly in spiral dance, and you break that tunnel into short overlapping segments. Each turn creates friction, pressing fabric closer to skin, closing gaps. At the same time, the slight thickness adds more air minus holding capacity. Your calves and shins, host to important blood vessels, become less vulnerable. Even your feet get their version. Full socks or foot wraps, changed when possible. Stuffing extra dry grass or wool into your shoes creates another layer. If you dry those materials by the fire and refresh them daily, your feet might not be comfortable, but they will be less likely to go numb. If can sound like overthinking in a war room, but when you live where the outside air regularly dips below freezing and the wind never stops, clothing choices become the difference between life and death long before they become style. That is where Viking thinking diverges from much of modern fashion. We, especially in temper-turbulent places, dress for a journey between heated spaces. From home to car, car to office, office to shop. The coldest parts of our day are brief. We tolerate discomfort in those and minus between moments for the sake of looking a certain way. In the warm, thin jackets, exposed ankles, stylish shoes that ignore water. Our clothing works in partnership with centralized heating. When the systems fail, its weaknesses are exposed. The cotton hoodie becomes a cold sponge and fleet. Can't soak through clean and drab heat. We feel personally betrayed. The Vikings had no such illusions. There were heated spaces, but they did not assume the world would cushion the time between them. The cloak on your shoulders had to be enough on its own. The wind would not care whether you looked good. Their clothing philosophy began from a different question. Not how can I feel warm, but how can I avoid losing heat faster than I can afford? It is a small shift in words, but an enormous shift in mindset. Feeling warm is a transient sensation. You can feel warm standing right next to a fire. Take 2 steps back, and the feeling vanishes. Not losing heat is quieter, but cold minus weather clothing often means you never feel particularly toasty. You feel neutral. The cold is there, but it is something pressing at your boundaries rather than pouring in. You are not overheating, not sweating heavily. You are simply okay. Vikings aimed for okay. Their garments allowed for adjustment. You NP in the cloak when rowing hard. Throw back the hood when working near the fire. Loosen the belt after a meal. He accepted that some parts would be cold. Hands, face, the tip of the nose. They could sting and burn and numb and recover. Those sensations were part of life, not aberrations to be banished at any cost. The cost they refused to pay was letting cold reach the core unnoticed. If you came in and felt a deep chill on your spine that would go away, some noticed. More layers. A seat by the fire. Hot food. If a child's hands were at can drain, that was unfortunate. If their lips were pale and their breath shallow, that was an alarm. Everything about the clothing system supported that triage. Protect the center. Accept manageable discomfort at the edge. In doing so, Vikings turn their bodies into walking hearths, not flashy bonfires, but banked ones. Embers under ash, slow minus burning, hard to extinguish. The wool and linen and leather they wore were the stones and bricks around that fire. We love the image of a Viking silhouetted against a blazing hall, cloak snapping. In fact, most of the work of staying alive happened in much humbler ways. In the choice to wear one more layer, to patch a cloak instead of letting a hole grow, to wrap a leg tightly instead of leaving it bare. If you strip away the romance and look at the system, you see a people who understood that warmth was not a gift, but a responsibility. You eat to keep the fire inside you burning. You move to stir the embers. You build your house to shelter it at night. You build your clothes to shelter it when you step out. Step back onto that long ship. The sea is black under the stones. The oars move. Your hands ache. Your toes are damp. You adjust the fold of your cloak and feel the air under it. No longer the sane air that slashes at your cheeks. It belongs to you now, warmed and softened. There is no fire on the deck. There cannot be. Yet you carry one with you all the same. Not in your hand. Under your ribs, wrapped in wool and hidden air,